All right, so we're really diving into Damon Stafford's Believe in Better today.
Mhm.
You've shared some excerpts, and I
Yeah.
gotta say, this isn't your typical, you know, business book. It's
Yeah.
like packed with advice, but it's all through his like personal stories of building this company.
Yeah, it's interesting how he uses those anecdotes and experiences to like illustrate the point. It makes it
Yeah.
so much more, I guess, grounded and relatable, right? It's not just theoretical.
Exactly. It makes you want to like grab a notepad and
Yeah.
be like, okay, hold on, I gotta write this down. And speaking of noteworthy, let's start with this whole authenticity thing.
Okay.
He's like a big advocate for just being yourself, even when it's uncomfortable,
Right.
which he illustrates with a story about a poker game.
Yes. Yes. He talks
High
about
stakes poker.
being invited to play with these Ivy League guys.
Oh, yeah.
And, he kind of recognizes, the poker's not my game.
Yeah.
I'm going to hang back, have a tequila and a cigar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that he's rejecting their world or anything.
No,
It's just he knows himself, right?
Yeah.
And he's comfortable with that, even in a setting where I think a lot of us would feel the pressure to,
to fit in.
yeah, to fit in.
And it's interesting because it sounds like that actually earned him respect,
It did.
by not trying to be something he wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, he kind of, it seems like a recurring theme for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got that story about the insurance executive visiting his office.
Yes, yes.
And,
The office is, let's just say, modest.
yeah,
It wasn't fancy, but he owned it.
he owned it.
He didn't try to hide it. He embraced the reality of where they were at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the executives saw past the fluorescent lighting and saw the value that Stafford and his team brought to the table.
It's like honesty is a power move almost.
Right,
You
exactly.
think, like, especially early on, you'd be a little self-conscious.
Sure.
But he flipped the script. So instead of like fake it till you make it, it's more like,
Keep it real. Keep it real.
and the right people will see that.
And they'll recognize, yeah, your worth.
And that commitment to authenticity, I think, also fuels his approach to this whole work-life balance thing.
Okay, so about that whole hustle part,
Yes, sir.
he's all about like maximizing every minute.
He is.
Flying to Vegas for a site visit, working late, 6 a.m. flight back to be with family.
Right.
Is that like sustainable long term?
I think that's where the strategic part comes in.
Okay.
It's not just about, working long hours. It's about being very intentional with your time.
Okay.
Remember how he was talking about planning his sales routes?
Yeah.
So he could fit in as many calls as possible?
It's that calculated effort.
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's not just always on. It's about like
Making it count.
making every minute count. Yeah.
Whether it's planning your sales pitch in the car or, using downtime to analyze those reports he loves so much.
Right. It's about knowing your goals and then structuring your time to achieve them. Even if it means, working on a plane when everyone else is asleep.
Which I gotta admit, I'm not built that way, but I can see how it gets
Yeah.
results.
It does.
But let's move on to something a little less about like clock watching and more about like connecting with clients.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What about this whole selling through education concept?
Yeah.
It's a very different approach.
Absolutely. He believes in empowering your clients with knowledge, right? Instead of just bombarding them with these sales pitches.
Yeah.
And he shares this great story about, writing that article on the R22 refrigerant regulations,
Oh yeah.
which he'll admit he wasn't an expert on at the start.
Yeah, and then he ends up getting a call from the EPA.
Exactly.
Talk about pressure.
Right. Talk about, oh boy, I hope I got this right.
Yeah.
But instead of panicking, he actually uses that knowledge,
Right.
engages in this really thoughtful conversation,
Yeah.
even challenges some of their assumptions, and it leads to this great collaboration.
Wow.
He ends up being invited to be part of a stakeholder committee on refrigerant policy.
See, that's the thing about this approach, right? You're not just selling a product. You're building that trust and credibility.
Right.
It's like when he talks about later how his company focuses on those educational seminars instead of like traditional sales presentations.
Exactly. It's like choosing a surgeon.
Okay.
You're more likely to trust the one who takes the time to explain the procedure,
Right.
answers all your questions.
Right.
They're demonstrating their expertise. They're
Right.
building your confidence.
And that expertise seems much more effective than, like, remember that story about the 1,500 rubber duckies
Oh, yeah.
at that tech conference?
Absolutely.
Like, that's a hilarious example of his, like, playful side.
Yeah.
But it also shows that, like, gimmicks only get you so far.
Right, right.
Building those real connections, it takes offering something of value, right?
It does, yeah.
Understanding their needs.
Absolutely.
So no more rubber duckies unless they like come with an MBA,
No,
right?
exactly.
But that leads perfectly into like this power perspective that he talks about.
Right.
He really stresses understanding your customer's viewpoint, your colleagues, even your competitors, to make those good decisions.
Yeah, because even with the best of intentions,
Right.
you can miss the mark if you're not considering that bigger picture.
Yeah, it's like that, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's you can't see the value of the deal because you're too focused on the headphones.
Right,
Because
exactly.
he talks about his business partner and this whole Bose headphones thing.
Yes, where
Evil.
they closed this massive deal.
Yeah.
And he was so excited, he decided to gift the other partner a pair of headphones.
Which, on the surface, seems like a nice gesture,
Right, totally.
but the deal was worth like $300,000.
I know. You would think something a little more,
A little more substantial.
substantial, yeah.
Would be in order to...
Maybe a nice dinner or something.
Yeah, exactly. But it just goes to show, that lack of perspective can lead to those misjudgments.
It can, and it can have much larger consequences than just,
Right.
a slightly awkward gift-giving situation.
Like when he was talking about developing that software platform,
Oh, right.
and then the pandemic hit.
Right, and it became irrelevant.
Became irrelevant because he didn't...
He didn't see that shift coming.
Yeah.
And even with the best product, if you don't have that awareness of the wider context, it can really undermine your efforts.
Absolutely. It can make you feel like you're swimming upstream.
Exactly.
Which makes me think about his whole approach to teamwork.
Okay.
He's big on transparency, like to the point where he has a company scoreboard
Yes.
that tracks everyone's performance.
For everyone to see.
No hiding from the numbers.
Nope.
It's like having your report card on the refrigerator, but for business.
Basically, yeah.
But it keeps everyone accountable, right?
It does.
And it fosters that kind of healthy competition.
Right, and it highlights how everyone's efforts are contributing to the bigger picture.
Right, because it's not just about like individual achievements, it's about how it all ties together.
Exactly.
Like that story he told about the sales team just crushing their goals.
Yeah.
And the operations team is like scrambling to keep up.
Scrambling.
And then, I love this, the chief revenue officer celebrates by like shoving a game ball in the COO's face.
At the quarterly meeting, I mean, talk about a memorable way to acknowledge a job well done.
Right.
But it really does paint a picture of their company culture.
Yeah. It's like, we work hard, but we also...
We have fun.
We have fun. We're all in this together.
And we're not afraid to be a little bit silly.
Exactly.
But it also underscores Stafford's point that transparency, even when it leads to some, good-natured ribbing,
Right.
allows for open communication and a shared understanding of everyone's contribution.
So it's not about me. It's about...
Us,
Yeah.
and how we all fit together.
Which I think plays into his whole thing about incentivizing individual goals.
It's an interesting approach.
Instead of team goals.
He argues that by really focusing on individual performance
Yeah.
and rewarding it generously, you're indirectly ensuring that the team and company goals are met.
Right. It's like that whole a rising tide lifts all boats
Exactly.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But speaking of tides, let's shift gears a bit here and talk about profitability as a journey.
Okay.
He's adamant that profit isn't just the destination.
Right.
It's the fuel
It's what powers everything else.
that powers innovation and growth.
The growth.
And what I find interesting is how he contrasts his approach, very meticulous, with his former business partner.
Oh, yeah. Who was much more interested in appearances.
Yeah, more about the image
On the bottom line.
than the actual numbers.
Remember that story about the office carpet?
Oh, right. Where we cared more about the carpet than
The balance sheet.
balance sheet, yeah.
It just highlights that danger, of getting caught up in the superficial markers of success
Right.
while neglecting the core principles of profitability.
And he's a big believer in building that sustainable system,
Yes.
driven by process, smart decisions,
Understanding your customers.
and that focus on process
Yes.
is something he really takes to heart.
He does.
Which actually leads us into his next key principle, process as the engine.
And he doesn't just talk about it.
Right.
He lives it.
He lives it, yeah.
Remember how he numbered each step in his company's workflow?
Oh, yeah.
So it became like their language.
Yeah.
You want a promotion, you're moving up to the 4s.
Yeah, it's like a secret code for efficiency.
Right.
But seriously, that level of systemization, I mean, that's got to be so valuable.
It is, especially as a company grows.
As it scales, yeah.
Because it allows for that scalability without sacrificing quality or consistency.
Right.
He even argues that having these robust processes actually allowed him to step back from the day-to-day. He didn't have to micromanage anymore.
Right.
He could focus on the bigger picture.
Strategic leadership.
Exactly, which ultimately leads to better decision-making.
Right.
And, you guessed it, increased profitability.
So, process prints billionaires, as he puts it.
There you go.
That's a bold statement.
It is.
But I'm curious, with all this focus on process, how do you balance that need for efficiency with, customization?
That's a good question.
Because customers today, they want that personalized experience.
They do, and I think that's where discernment comes in.
Okay.
He would argue that not every single customization request is created equal.
Right.
It's about evaluating each one.
Okay.
How important is this client?
Right.
What's the impact going to be on the process? What's the overall value here?
So it's picking your battles.
It is.
Knowing when to be flexible and when to, hold the line.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of that story he told about, the king who ordered a custom-made chariot.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a demanding customer, right?
Right.
And the king was furious when it didn't meet his every expectation.
Of course.
And let's just say, it didn't end well for the chariot maker.
Yeah, not every customer's right.
Exactly.
And sometimes you do have to say no.
You do.
Even if it means losing a sale.
Sometimes.
But when you do choose to work with a client,
right,
he's a big believer that transparency builds trust.
Absolutely.
Which is actually his next key principle.
It makes sense when you think about it.
It does.
Being open and honest, even when it's difficult.
Right.
It just strengthens those relationships.
It's about acknowledging that elephant in the room so you can address it.
Right, instead of tiptoeing around it.
Instead of, pretending it's not there.
He calls it paying the transparency tax.
The transparency tax.
Those difficult conversations, the uncomfortable truths that often we try to avoid.
We avoid, yeah.
But I think by addressing them head on, we create a more honest and productive environment.
It's like, he used the example of that CEO who had to delay a product launch.
Oh, right.
Because of a technical glitch.
Right.
And instead of trying to hide it,
right,
she emailed every customer.
Wow.
Explained the situation, offered a sincere apology.
And what happened?
And they appreciated it.
They did.
It strengthened their trust in the company.
It's proof that honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is usually the best policy.
It's the best way to go.
It builds that trust.
It does. That foundation.
But this whole idea of being so open, so vulnerable, especially in a leadership role, seems counterintuitive.
It does.
Because you're always told to project confidence, even when you might not be feeling it.
Right.
But he's saying, that's not the way to go.
No, he argues that true leadership comes from a place of authenticity.
Okay.
From owning both your successes and, yes, your failures.
Owning it.
Owning it.
He really emphasizes that.
And it's about, like he said, being real, not perfect.
Because none of us are perfect.
No.
And I think that's refreshing, especially in the business world, which can be so polished and,
Yeah, it's all about appearances sometimes.
Exactly.
But he's saying, let's drop the facade.
Let's be real.
Let's be human.
And that ties into this overarching theme that we see throughout the book, which is this idea of change or be changed.
Right. So talk about that.
So he argues that embracing change strategically and decisively is essential for staying ahead.
Okay.
And he doesn't just mean reacting to change when it's forced upon you.
Right.
He talks about defensive versus offensive change.
What's the difference?
So defensive change is like reacting to external factors.
Okay.
Like when he had to let go of that entire development team.
Right.
Because they weren't keeping pace.
Right.
But then there's offensive change, which is about being proactive, seeking out opportunities for innovation.
So kind of like instead of just putting out fires, you're
setting controlled burns.
Setting controlled burns.
To clear the way for new growth.
I like that.
Right.
And he seems to really embody that.
He does. He's always looking for ways to improve, even when things are going well.
Which is interesting because he also talks about this, obligation to understand, right?
Yes, he's open to new ideas.
Yeah.
Even if they come from unexpected sources, but he doesn't just blindly accept them.
Right.
He puts them through a rigorous evaluation process.
He's got that system.
To make sure they align with his values, with his business objectives.
Like when that person suggested he develop software for their competitors.
Oh, right. Which, I mean,
It's like, here are the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly.
Just take everything.
but he recognized that while it sounded good on the surface,
Right.
it went against his company's best interest.
So it's about being open to change,
Yes.
but not to the point of self-sabotage.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to have those boundaries.
You gotta have boundaries. But how do you know when it's the right time to make a change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I think Stafford would say it's more of an art than a science.
Okay.
It's about trusting your gut,
Okay.
relying on your experience,
Mhm.
and deeply understanding your business
Right.
and the market.
The market, yeah.
He stresses asking the right questions.
Like what?
Does this add value to the customer?
Okay.
Does this improve our product?
Mm-hmm.
Does this keep our employees engaged?
So making sure the change aligns with the big picture.
With your overall vision
Right.
and your goals?
But sometimes change is just thrust upon us, right?
It is.
We don't get a choice. We just have to adapt.
Roll with the punches.
It's like that story he told about his trip to Prague
Oh, yes.
to see the Rolling Stones,
the fake ticket.
the fake ticket.
Oh, no.
He could have panicked,
Right.
but he didn't.
He used his wits
He used his wits and some quick thinking.
and managed to talk his way into that concert.
Talk about a valuable life lesson,
I know, right?
both on and off the stage.
Went off the stage.
Well, I think we've covered the kind of core principles of believing better.
We've hit the highlights.
And what a ride it's been.
It has been a journey.
From, authenticity, strategic hustle, transparency, change.
It was all connected.
It is. It's all connected.
It's like a roadmap, not just for building a successful business,
Right.
but for navigating life.
Life itself, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure it out, right?
We are.
And he leaves us with that powerful reminder,
Which is
change or be changed by someone else.
change or be changed.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Right.
Which of these principles resonated with you the most?
Ooh.
And more importantly, what one action will you take today
Ooh. Good question.
to apply these insights
Yeah.
to your work or your life?
That is a great question to ponder
It is.
as we sign off here.
Expert.
Remember, building a better business, a better you.
Starts with believing.
Believing
Possibility
in the possibility, yeah.
of better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Believe in Better.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in better. It's like that saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, except in this case, you can't see the value of a massive deal because you're too focused on the headphone.
Exactly. And this lack of perspective can have much larger consequences. Remember when Stafford poured his heart and soul into developing that incredible software platform, only to have it become irrelevant due to the pandemic's impact?
Right, because he hadn't fully considered how the market was shifting.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even with the best product or service, a lack of awareness about the wider context can undermine your efforts.
Absolutely. Which makes me think about Stafford's approach to teamwork. He's a big advocate for transparency, even going as far as having a company scoreboard that tracks individual and team performance for everyone to see.
No hiding from the numbers, huh?
Yep.
It's kind of like having your report card posted on the refrigerator for everyone to see, but for business.
In a way, yes. It keeps everyone accountable and fosters a healthy sense of competition. But it's not just about individual achievements. It also highlights how everyone's efforts contribute to the bigger picture. Remember the story about the sales team crushing their goals, leading to the operations team scrambling to keep up?
Oh yeah, and then the chief revenue officer celebrated by shoving a game ball in the chief operating officer's face at the quarterly meeting.
Right.
Talk about a memorable way to acknowledge a job well done.
Right. It paints a vivid picture of their company culture. But it also underscores Stafford's point. Transparency, even when it leads to some good-natured ribbing, allows for open communication and a shared understanding of everyone's contributions.
So it's not just about individual wins, it's about recognizing the interconnectedness of different teams and roles, which I think ties into his belief in incentivizing individual goals over team goals.
Right. It's an interesting approach. He argues that by focusing on individual performance and rewarding it generously, you indirectly ensure that team and company goals are met. A rising tide lifts all boats, as they say.
Makes sense. But speaking of tides, let's shift gears a bit and talk about profitability as a journey. Stafford emphasizes that profit isn't just a destination, It's the fuel that powers innovation and sustainable growth.
What I find intriguing is how he contrasts his meticulous approach to profitability with his former business partner, who was more interested in appearances than the bottom line. Remember the story about the office carpet?
Oh, right. He was more concerned with the color of the carpet than the color of the balance sheet.
Precisely. It highlights the danger of getting caught up in superficial markers of success while neglecting the core principles of profitability. Stafford emphasizes building a sustainable system driven by efficient processes, smart decision-making, and a deep understanding of customer needs.
And this focus on process is something he takes very seriously. In fact, his next key principle is all about it: process as the engine.
And he doesn't just talk about the importance of processes, he lives it. Remember how he numbered each step in his company's workflow?
Yeah.
It became part of their language, ensuring everyone was on the same page. Want a promotion? You're moving up to the floors!
It's like a secret code for efficiency. But seriously, that level of systemization seems like it would be incredibly valuable, especially as a company grows.
Absolutely. It enables scalability without sacrificing quality or consistency. Stafford even argues that having robust processes allowed him to step back from micromanagement and focus on more strategic leadership, which ultimately leads to better decision-making and, you guessed it, increased profitability.
So, process prints billionaires, as he puts it. It's a bold statement. But I'm curious, with all this emphasis on process, how do you balance the need for efficiency with the demands of customization? After all, today's customers expect a personalized experience.
That's where discernment comes in. Stafford argues that not every customization request is created equal. It's about evaluating each one carefully, considering the client's importance, the potential impact on the process, and the overall value proposition.
So it's about choosing your battles, knowing when to be flexible and when to stick to your guns. It reminds me of that story he told about the king who ordered a custom-made chariot.
Ah, yes, a classic case of a demanding customer. Remember how the king was furious when the chariot didn't meet his every expectation? And let's just say the chariot maker faced some unpleasant consequences.
Right, which is a good reminder that not every customer is right, and sometimes you have to be willing to say no, even if it means losing a sale.
Exactly. But when you do choose to work with a client, Stafford believes that transparency builds trust, which brings us to his next key principle.
It makes sense when you think about it. Being open and honest, even when it's difficult, builds stronger relationships.
And it goes beyond just building trust. It fosters a sense of freedom. Stafford argues that being transparent about challenges and setbacks eliminates guilt and uncertainty, allowing you to focus on finding solutions.
It's about acknowledging the elephant in the room so you can actually address it instead of tiptoeing around it. He calls it paying the transparency tax.
Right, those difficult conversations and uncomfortable truths that we often try to avoid.
We do.
But by addressing them head on, we create a more honest and ultimately more productive environment.
He gave the example of the CEO who had to delay a product launch due to a technical glitch.
Right.
Instead of trying to hide it, she emailed every customer, explaining the situation and offering a sincere apology.
And what happened?
They were okay with it.
The customers appreciated her honesty. It actually strengthened their trust in the company.
It's proof that honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is usually the best policy. But this idea of being open and vulnerable, especially in a leadership role, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? We're often told to project confidence, even if we're not feeling it.
It's a fair point. But Stafford argues that true leadership comes from a place of authenticity, from owning both your successes and your failures. He calls it owning it.
It's that whole be real, not perfect approach, which I have to admit is refreshing, especially in the often polished world of business.
It is. And it seems to tie into this overarching theme we see throughout the book, change or be changed. Stafford argues that embracing change, strategically and decisively, is essential for staying ahead of the curve and achieving lasting success. And he doesn't just mean reacting to change when it's thrust upon you.
Right, he talks about defensive versus offensive change. Defensive being reacting to external factors, like when he had to let go of an entire development team because they weren't keeping pace with market demands.
Tough decision, but sometimes you have to make those difficult calls to stay ahead of the game. But then there's the offensive change, which is all about being proactive, seeking out opportunities for innovation and disruption, not just waiting for them to land in your lap.
So kind of like instead of just putting out fires,
They're setting controlled burns.
you're setting controlled burns.
Yeah, to clear the way for new growth.
I like that. And he seems to really embody that,
He does. He's always looking for ways to improve, even when things are going well.
which is interesting because he also talks about this, obligation to understand, right?
Yes. He's open to new ideas, even if they come from unexpected sources, but he doesn't blindly accept them. He puts them through a rigorous evaluation process to ensure they align with his core values and business objectives.
Like when that person suggested he develop software for their competitors.
Oh, right. Which,
It's like, here are the keys to the kingdom.
exactly.
Please just take everything.
But he recognized that while it sounded good on the surface, it ultimately went against his company's best interests.
So it's about being open to change,
Yes.
but not to the point of self-sabotage.
Exactly. You have to have those boundaries.
You got to have boundaries.
Absolutely.
But how do you know when it's the right time to make a change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I think Stafford would say it's more of an art than a science.
Okay.
It's about trusting your gut, relying on your experience, and deeply understanding your business and the market. He stresses asking the right questions. Does this add value to the customer? Does this improve our product? Does this keep our employees engaged?
So making sure the change aligns with the big picture.
With your overall vision and goals.
Right.
But sometimes change is just thrust upon us, right?
It is.
We don't get a choice, we just have to adapt.
You got to roll with the punches.
Exactly.
It's like that story he told about his trip to Prague
Oh, yes.
to see the Rolling Stones.
The fake ticket.
The fake ticket.
Oh, no.
He could have panicked,
You're right.
but he didn't.
He used his wits
He used his wits and some quick thinking.
and managed to talk his way into that concert.
Talk about a valuable life lesson,
I know, right?
all of on and off the stage.
On and off the stage.
Well, I think we've covered the kind of core principles of believe in better and what a ride it's been. From, authenticity, strategic hustle,
Transparency.
change.
They're all connected.
It is. It's all connected.
It's like a roadmap, not just for building a successful business, but for navigating life.
Life itself, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure it out, right?
They are.
And he leaves us with that powerful reminder: change or be changed by someone else. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Which of these principles resonated with you the most? And more importantly, what one action will you take today to apply these insights to your work or your life?
That is a great question to ponder as we sign off here.
All right.
Remember, building a better business, a better you, it all starts with believing
Believe it.
in the possibility
In a possibility, yeah.
of better. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Believe in Better. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in better.
It's your body.